But Will, let's move on to this story that you actually wrote up for RT. American spy charged with terrorism in Venezuela over alleged conspiracy to sabotage oil refineries and power plants. So is Maduro getting a little paranoid, or is there something to this, Will?
Yeah, that's actually something I'm still trying to figure out myself. Like, the Venezuelans are claiming that another American mercenary was caught in their country, like plotting sabotage, as you read in the headline, their oil refineries and power plants. However, like I should say, Caracas has released like virtually no evidence for this so far. This is all basically just based on what the Venezuelan government is claiming. But they do claim that this American, Matthew John Heath, that he worked for this private military contractor that's somehow connected to the CIA, and they say that he was caught with a group of Venezuelans in the country in Venezuela, some of them in the military, and they were found with weapons, including like a grenade launcher, I guess, and plastic explosives. They were found with bundles of American cash, and then apparently the cell phones they had contained photos of like military installations and these energy facilities, which they're alleging, they were going to try to sabotage and blow up somehow. I guess presumably with the plastic explosives that they are said to have, that's allegedly found on them. This guy Heath was arrested last Friday, along with these 6 Venezuelans. There was a couple days of delay though before the chief prosecutor finally came out on Monday and declared that there would be charges for him. And he said it was in addition to terrorism, it's for what there's weapons trafficking charges and a conspiracy charge, which is kind of interesting because that's the exact same charges that those other Americans were hit with. Lucas Denman and Aaron Barry, those former Green Berets who were caught up in that whole crazy like incursion raid plot last May, who were arrested in Venezuela in May. We covered this too on your old show in Foreign Policy Focus.
Right, I'll go ahead and link to that episode, and it was Silver Corp headed by Justin Gordeau, right, that ran that operation.
Yeah, exactly. Silver Corp USA was this. I think they're based in Florida. There's this private mercenary firm, and these 2 former Green Berets, like apparently worked for this guy's company. And yeah, they were found in Venezuela with a group of like defectors, like I think like a couple dozen Venezuelans, and they were doing this like like a boat raid, like raiding the coast of Venezuela, where I guess the goal ultimately was to like abduct Maduro and take over an airport. The whole thing was like absolutely insane and wild, and like it sounds like it never could have possibly been feasible. But nonetheless, that is what this Goudreau guy, says that the plot was. However, for this more recent one with this Heath guy, like we haven't seen any of the kind of crazy stuff that came out with that last one. Like with that last story with Silvercorp, we eventually had like a contract that was signed up between the Venezuelan opposition and this company Silvercorp, and of course the U.S. heavily backs the Venezuelan opposition. So that I don't know. There was all kinds of interesting stuff with that previous alleged mercenary plot. Nothing like that has come out for this Heath guy yet. But like we very well may. That's still pretty early. We might still see things like that to come out here.
Yeah, so a couple things when I read your story here, Will, that stood out to me. One, again, is that the evidence from the Venezuelan government seems lacking. And the other thing that kind of popped into my head is, other than maybe the pictures of the military installation, it sounded to me like this guy may be some kind of involved in drug trafficking, which is something that ends up happening with a lot of U.S. special forces after they get, not like a majority or anything, but a disproportionate number. You read a lot of stories about U.S. Former special operations, being involved in drug smuggling from Latin America back up to the U.S. In different kind of ways. And yeah, so it's definitely possible, that that's what was going on here. And then, you happen to find an American in Venezuela with a couple, a couple $1,000s in cash and some explosives and weapons. And I imagine that's pretty easy to spin into another coup attempt. And so the other thing that stood out to me was just that, while from especially an American, not being a Venezuelan within the country point of view, it seems like pretty thin evidence. But if I were a Venezuelan and, just a couple months ago, there's an admitted coup attempt against, Maduro with a couple Americans and a couple dozen Venezuelans, I would, be very willing to take the government's word for it that this happened again 3 months later. Especially when the first case is so clear cut and open, even if this one seems like there's some details missing to prove that, you may expect that they come out later. So I definitely wouldn't be surprised if Venezuelans are, eating this up, and it makes for very good propaganda for Maduro, and it's all because it was, justified by the previous attempted coup in May.
Right, right. And let's not forget too, there was another like US backed like incursion or coup attempt back in I think like April of 2019 where the Venezuelan opposition just like tried to convince the security forces to defect. And this, but they failed. This whole thing fizzled. But nonetheless, that was like very openly U.S. backed, and the U.S. has been backing the so-called interim president Juan Guaido there for quite some time. And then like you're saying, the Venezuelans see certain things, and it might make them might make this more plausible to them. They also see how the U.S. has been imposing sanctions on the country, how they've indicted Nicolas Maduro, the president, on like narco terrorism charges, how they've launched this like counter narcotics mission in the Caribbean with an eye on Venezuela. All these very hostile things toward the Venezuelan government. So yeah, they see all that kind of stuff, and they probably are more liable to believe these kind of claims about mercenary plots and stuff.